Outburst, a Todd Mills Mystery, Book 4. Author, R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher, Scribble Pub, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1998. Narrator, Eric Ost. Chapter 20. The big news that all the media, radio, television, newspaper, were covering was the discovery of the raincoat in the trunk of Christopher Kinney's Oldsmobile. And not just any old yellow raincoat, but a yellow raincoat with blood on it. Like a lynch mob, the media was working itself into a frenzy, with some of the local radio talk show hosts speculating that this was it. The cops had their killer, and Kinney would be locked away for the rest of his or her or its life. The only question remaining was where to incarcerate him. The men's or the women's prison? Or how about the pound? One disc jockey even told the first Christopher Kinney joke, "How many drag queens does it take to kill a..." Todd wanted more, of course, for his story tonight. More precisely, he wanted something different, determined to get just that. After lunch, he sat down in his office and tried Maureen Shee's number another time. And once again, he got the energetic message, "Hi, this is Maureen Shee. I'm away from the phone, but leave a message and I'll get back to you, hopefully within the hour. Thanks, and have a great day." Still trying to figure out why he knew her name, he hung up without leaving a message. He most definitely wanted to talk with her, but what was this bit about calling back within the hour? And why hadn't she? Either it was a ploy of some sort, or she was avoiding him, which was a distinct possibility. He guessed that in the message he'd already left, he shouldn't have told her that he was from WLAK. Letting someone know he was from the media usually worked for him. In this case, though, Todd suspected it wasn't. He was just rolling his chair across the small room when his cellular phone lying by his computer started to ring. He looked at it, hoped this was one of the calls he was waiting for, and grabbed it. "Hi, this is Todd Mills." "Hello, this is the operator. Will you accept a collect call from Ron Ravel?" "Absolutely." Thrilled, Todd reached for a pen and pad. Now the trick wouldn't simply be keeping him on the line, but also getting him to cooperate. He'd kill to get this guy on film. The connection went through, and Todd jumped right in, saying, "Hi, Mr. Ravel. Thank you very much for calling back." "Sure," replied the hesitant voice. "But who are you?" A bit of silence. "And what do you want?" "My name is Todd Mills, and I'm an investigative reporter for WLAK TV in Minneapolis. I called this morning trying to reach Ron Ravel, the younger brother of police officer Dave Ravel. Am I speaking to the right person?" "Yes, but..." Wanting to hook him, and hook him fast, Todd interrupted, saying, "I'm wondering if you'd be willing to answer a few questions for me about Christopher Lewis Kinney, the man who was accused of murdering your brother?" There was a long, cautious pause, a deep breath. "Like what?" "Last night, Christopher Kinney was arrested here in Minneapolis in conjunction with..." "Oh my God," Ron Ravel gasped, his voice cracking. "He did it again, didn't he? He killed another cop, right?" "It hasn't been proven yet, of course, but a police officer was murdered several days ago, and it appears that Kinney will be charged with that crime." And they talked for nearly 15 minutes, Todd running through the whole situation, then scribbling down nearly every detail he could get from Ravel. "Ron," said Todd as they wrapped up their conversation, "I'd very much like to get you on camera. Would you be willing to do that?" "Sure, but how? I mean, I'm out in California. What are you going to do? Come out here?" "Actually, our operations department could set up some satellite time with WLAK's affiliate out there in LA, and then we'd be able to shoot you directly from there. Would you be willing? It wouldn't take very long. I'd be here at WLAK, and all you'd have to do is go into the studio out there." After some hesitation, Ron Ravel agreed, and while Todd was hoping they could still do it that afternoon, on such short notice it couldn't be set up until that evening at 9 Central Standard Time. In the ensuing time, Todd dashed downtown for the formal tape-recorded interview that Rollins had requested, and then hurried back and pulled together an update for the 6 o'clock news. And now, he said in one of the large edit bays, a dimly lit glassed-in booth filled with monitors and control boards and taping equipment. If all went as was supposed to, the satellite connection with WLAK's affiliate would take place in just 30 seconds. On the other side of the edit bay, Bradley focused a Betacam, a new 300A that needed hardly any light because of a new microchip, and said, "Okay, we're all set." "Great," replied Todd, who now wore a blue Oxford shirt and a navy and yellow striped tie. "Can you leave it running, or do you need to stay?" "Oh, I'll stay," he said, squinting as he made the last adjustments. "I just want to make sure you keep in focus." Todd had no idea, of course, what type of interview Ron Revelle would be. He had sounded reticent on the phone, so he might not be too forthcoming, which was why Todd had decided on a reversal, having himself taped as well. Todd had learned the hard way. Would give him a few extra guarantees if, in response to a question like, "Do you think Kenny should be put away for life?" Rivera merely replied with a non-answer like, "Well," or "Yes, but," or simply, "Absolutely." And then at least they'd be able to edit in Todd and his words, which would give context to the reply. After all, Todd never did any self-editing during an actual interview like this. It wasn't until later, once they had it all on tape, that Bradley and he would go over this whole thing frame by frame, picking and choosing, cutting and butting, one thing up against another to get just the right play. Turning his attention to the router switches, Todd flicked one of the black buttons and saw the monitor in front of him fill with snow. Suddenly, the screen went from a blizzard to a rainbow of colored bars, indicating that the uplink to the satellite was taking place. Immediately thereafter, the LA station's call letters appeared and the 10-second countdown began. Todd quickly shoved a beta tape into a recorder and picked up not an earpiece, but a telephone receiver. He had all of 10 minutes for the interview, which was about as long a satellite interview as he ever conducted, and all he hoped to snag in that time was a soundbite of some sort from Ron Revelle. If he didn't get a pithy, dramatic statement in that time, his personal rule was never one longer than 19 seconds, he wouldn't get one, no matter how long the interview. Suddenly, the colored bars vanished and the image of a young man appeared on the monitor before Todd. He was a nice enough looking guy, chestnut hair, striking eyebrows, and a broad, clear face, seated in what looked like the LA station's newsroom. He wore a blue sport jacket and a tie and white shirt. "Hi, Ron, it's me, Todd Mills." Spooked by the clarity of the sound, Ron jumped and looked around as if a ghost had just whispered in his ear. With his right hand, he then nervously pressed the earpiece deeper into his ear, while with his left he touched the lav mic, pinned to the lapel of his sport coat. "You look great," said Todd into the phone as he stared at the monitor. "I can see you perfectly." "Oh, good," replied Ron, glancing around, not sure what to do. "Hi. I'm sorry you can't see me too, but all you have to do is look right into the camera," instructed Todd. Ron's hands settled back into his lap, and he turned his eyes straight ahead. "Sure. That's perfect. I just want to say thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it." "Of course." This wasn't good, thought Todd. He had to get him talking, get him to reply in more complete statements, and so Todd continued the banter. "Did you have any trouble finding the station?" No. I knew right where it was." "Good. And what's the weather like out there?" "Warm." "Smoggy?" "No, not too bad." "Well, it's hotter than hell out here," said Todd, avoiding Minnesota's most famous, or rather infamous quality, winter. "Humid, too, which I can't stand," Ron smiled. "That's what I hear, that it can get pretty bad out there in the summer." And then, boom. "Ron, I can't imagine what it's like to lose a brother to violence." It was Todd's method. His trick relaxed them, get them to loosen their guard, then hit them with a horribly honest, yet horribly sympathetic statement, and it worked, just like a surgeon sticking in a knife at the opportune moment. Todd's words cut through any defenses Ron Revelle might have had, slicing through to Ron's true thoughts and feelings. Right off the bat, Ravel blurted a soundbite Todd had only dreamed of getting. "It's been awful. Christopher Kinney is a monster, a cold-blooded murderer, and I'll never forgive him for killing my brother." It shocked even Todd that he got something so easily and so quickly, and for a moment, he didn't know what to do. That was it. All he needed. The next instant, though, a rush of excitement whizzed through him. This was a hot one, and instinctively, he knew there was more where that came from. He countered. Los Angeles officials, however, ruled that your brother died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Why do you believe otherwise? There was no way Dave would have killed himself. Dave was just 16 months older than me, and we were very close. He was upset over his recent divorce, but that was it. Okay, thought Todd. He wanted to get him to say it again. What Todd had earlier read about. It was tacky and insensitive of Todd to ask, but he pushed aside any hesitation. He had a job to do. If Ron got pissed off and ended the interview, then so be it. Todd already had what he needed. Ron, was your brother gay? Ravel's brow wrinkled downward, and then he said it just the way he had a couple of years ago for the papers. Maybe, maybe not. But I can tell you one thing for sure. Dave didn't kill himself over questions of his sexuality. Why do you say that? Because I'm gay, and Dave had virtually no problems with it. Who knows? Maybe he was struggling with some sexuality issues. He never mentioned anything, but there are plenty of families where all the kids are gay. So you're quite certain? I'm quite certain, interrupted Ravel, springing to verbosity as if he'd been waiting desperately for this opportunity. That Dave was murdered by that drag queen. Christopher Lewis Kinney? Yes, Dave was killed in that pervert's apartment, and I'm quite certain that Kinney was the one who fired the gun at my brother. Suddenly, Todd found himself in the position of trying to keep up with Ravel, and staring at the monitor, he said, "As I told you earlier, Christopher Kinney was arrested just last night in Minneapolis in conjunction with the murder of Minneapolis Park Police Officer Mark Forrest." Yeah, I'm not surprised. But why do you think your brother was murdered, Ron, when the Los Angeles authorities believe otherwise? Because the evidence is overwhelming. What do you mean? Can you be specific? Dave was at Kinney's apartment. There was no one else there. Kinney's fingerprints were on the handle of the gun that killed Dave, and when someone, a neighbor, came in after the shot, he found Kinney just sitting there, staring at my brother. The gun on the floor between them. Yes, but what happened? Why did the Los Angeles authorities rule this as suicide? And why did the prosecuting attorney drop the charges against Christopher Kinney? They ruled it a suicide because the Los Angeles police and the medical examiner screwed up right from the beginning. First, the police failed to do some kind of test, and... Oh, wait a minute, interrupted Todd, leaning forward, his eyes fixed on Ron's image. I haven't heard about this. They failed to do what? There's some kind of test that shows if a suspect has fired a gun. They should have done it, but they didn't. You mean they didn't do a paraffin test? Exactly. Incredulous, Todd sat there shaking his head. A paraffin test, which would have shown if there was gunpowder residue on Kinney's hands, should have been done right away. The moment he was brought in. Was Ron Ravel now saying it hadn't been done at all? If so, that would be ridiculous. And why the hell hadn't Todd seen mention of this screw-up in any of the newspaper articles he'd read on LexisNexis? Todd said, "But that should have been routine." I know. That's what I was told, too. Somehow they messed up there. There was too many cops involved. One guy thought the other had the test done. The other guy thought a third guy was taking care of it. You know, it was just a total screw-up, and no one realized the test hadn't been done until 3 or 4 days later. And that's way too late, said Todd, knowing that you had a few hours, not a few days, before the residue was washed away by something as simple as hand soap. That wasn't in the papers at all, was it? Of course not. You think the cops would let out something like that? Frankly, I'm really shocked. It's terrible. And then to top it off, the medical examiner who filed the initial report was arrested a day or two later for drunk driving. Everything he'd been working on was discredited, including the case he'd built against Kinney. I did read about that. Todd took a deep breath, gathered his thoughts, and staring at the video image of Ravel on the monitor said, "So the charges against Kinney were dropped because the prosecutor didn't believe he could prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt?" Exactly. And the reason he couldn't prove Kinney's guilt was because, between the cops and the medical examiner, all the evidence was either lost or ruined. I see. But... And an hour after that, interrupted Kinney, my mother, he bowed his head slightly and pinched the bridge of his nose with his right hand as if to forestall any tears. She was crushed by Dave's death. She'd been on medication ever since he was killed, but then an hour after she heard the news that Kinney was going free, she had this horrible stroke. This was good, excellent, all of it. He could use. Todd said, "I'm sorry." It was horrible, his eyes red with grief. Ravel stared up at the camera. I'd been waiting for this to happen. I hate to say it, but I've been waiting for Kinney to kill again. I knew he would. Sometimes you got nothing, thought Todd. Sometimes you get an avalanche. Almost more than you could use, and this was clearly the second. Wondering what a more moderate statement might elicit, Todd said, "Well, the authorities here in Hennepin County certainly have a challenging case. Kinney's being held at City Hall Jail, but he hasn't yet been formally charged with first-degree murder, which he would be, since a police officer was killed. That, I'm sure, will only happen when and if the prosecutor's office determines they have sufficient evidence against Kinney." As if spent, Ravel quietly shook his head on screen, his face drawn and achingly sad, and said, "Dear God, it would be a crime if they let him go again." Todd asked him several other questions, none of which elicited anything insightful, and then closed him out, saying, "Ron, we have only a few more moments of satellite time, but I want to thank you very much for joining me and sharing your opinions, and my condolences to you for the tragedies you have suffered." "Thank you." Okay, thought Todd. But was the door still open? "Can I give you a call if anything else comes up?" "Of course. You might have to leave a message. I travel a lot. I'm a flight attendant out here, but I check my messages all the time." "Listen, you take care," concluded Todd. "We'll all be curious to see how this thing ends up." A sad expression on his face, Ron Ravel shrugged and said, "I just hope the legal system doesn't let us down again." The next instant, the satellite connection was severed, and the monitor in front of Todd snapped into a blizzard of snow. Todd then hung up the phone, flicked off the router switch, and popped out the beta tape. "That was kind of incredible," said Bradley, turning off the camera, focused on Todd. "No kidding. I still can't believe they didn't do a paraffin test. That's just outrageous. The cops have done that on every murder I've ever covered." He thought for a moment. "But I don't think I want to touch that yet. I have to check it out. Get confirmation from the LA police, so maybe that's something for tomorrow night's story." "Right. Keeping a story like this going was harder than hell, but a major mistake like that by the Los Angeles police, particularly if it had never been reported, was ample material for another story or two." Before touching that one, though, he really did need to do some research and conduct a few more interviews. He could see it now, how he'd do his next piece on the murder of Mark Forrest. They start out with the image of Ron, his harsh words, and then they'd cut to a variety of other images, footage that a producer had already requested from their LA affiliate, and was due to come to WLAK on tomorrow morning's feed. Todd already knew they were going to get shots of Dave Ravel's body being carted from Kinney's apartment, and then, of course, shots of Dave Ravel's funeral. There'd be tons of that footage. Todd would also ask the producer to get images of Ravel in his police uniform, and of his mother as well. Perhaps all three. Dave, Ron, and Mom. Maybe he'd get a soundbite from the LA investigator and music. Oh yes, absolutely, there had to be music in tonight's package. From watching Spielberg movies, Todd had learned the importance of music to stir the emotions, but What could he use? In these Midwestern parts, any cop funeral was accompanied by a bagpiper, and he presumed that was the case in California as well. Right, to wrap the whole thing up, he'd show Ravel's body being lowered into the ground as a lone, mournful bagpiper toiled away, and the final sound wouldn't be Ron Ravel's condemning words of Kenny, but Todd wondering how this mystery was yet to unfold. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.